Hi, I'm Nardas.
And I'm Reese.
And today we're asking, is Jesus God's reflection?
This is Kleer series. What image springs to your mind when you think about God? Perhaps you see a powerful creator, an angry dictator, or even just a distant spectator. Do you picture an old man on a white cloud, or an impersonal energy like the Force in Star Wars? Maybe you see nothing at all.
This might be the first time you have ever thought about God in your entire life, but you wouldn't be the first person to do so. Many have looked far and wide simply to decide that there in fact is no God at all. When people look at the world, they see no evidence of a creator anywhere.
Others imagine a God that conveniently mirrors themselves. Their creator talks like them, thinks like them, and wants the same things they want. It's safe to say that if your God has the same likes and dislikes as you, you're basically bumping into your own reflection.
Have you ever seen those mirror mazes at your local theme park or those creepy fairgrounds? You often see them in scary movies or as part of an action sequence in a thriller. There's always a moment when the main character gets chased around and ends up running into themselves. That's a trick that these mazes plays at you. You look left, right, straight ahead and behind, but it all looks the same. You end up seeing the thousand versions of yourself. Looking for God can feel just as disorientating.
Back in the time of Jesus, people were confused by the endless different answers to the question, who is God? It was almost like they were searching for a way out of that mirror maze, but kept getting lost in the unending reflections. It was so hard to find a way through.
But if there really is a God, there must be a clear way of knowing what they're really like. Is there a measure that is more reliable than just our own opinion or what culture tells us to believe? How do we stop getting lost in thousands of versions of God? Is there a compass or a map to help us chart a path forward?
Apparently, the trick to navigating a mirror maze is to stop looking at the mirrors themselves. That's a top tip for when you next find yourself living through an action movie sequence. You've got to stop focusing on all the variations and find a single point of reference to navigate your way through.
Jesus made the shocking claim that he was a single point of reference for the whole of mankind. Christians believe if we want to know how God would really think, speak or act, then Jesus we find a solid starting point. Jesus was the answer to the question, what is God really like? In other words, if God took a selfie, it would look like Jesus.
Jesus himself was like a mirror to help us see God. Everything Jesus did reflected God's character. If Jesus was loving, we know God is loving too. Jesus cared, so therefore God cares too. And if Jesus has a roadmap for living, then so does God. The list of comparisons is endless. In Jesus, we see a visible snapshot of an invisible God come into sharp focus.
If this is true, then it rewires the way we see God completely. We didn't create God, God created us. Jesus was clear that we don't get to make our own version of God that fits our own convenient way of thinking or lifestyle. Maybe this was why so many people found him so controversial. He acted like he really knew God.
Ultimately, Jesus claimed he was more than a man who reflected what God was like. And people would soon find out that he was more than willing to die for that conviction.
You can't know someone if you don't know anything about them. You can't claim someone is interesting or off-putting if you've never been around them. You can't say someone is kind or cruel if you have never heard about them. And yet, this is what so many of us do with God, though we've lived our whole lives without him. We believe he must be distant or mean, and many of us think his very existence should be doubted. But all of these assumptions are actually unfounded because we haven't met him. That's why it's such a big deal that Jesus claimed to be God's reflection. Because that would mean in Jesus we could see who God is in his fullest expression, which would correct our misconceptions. We could see that God is not far, for he came near. He is not up there, he has come down here. He is not cruel, instead he is filled with grace. We don't need to doubt he exists because thousands have seen his face. So the next time you're wondering who God is, if he's real, and if you can have a connection, may I suggest you look to Jesus, for he is God's reflection.